What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bleacher Report college football reaction stream. Mike Golic Jr. with you, as always, former Notre Dame offensive lineman, current TNT sports broadcaster, and with you every single Wednesday, 6 o'clock Eastern, right here on the BR app, the Bleacher Report YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking us out and reacting to everything. In a crazy world of college football, don't smile because it happened, cry because it's over. That's a Sabrina Carpenter lyric, not the axiom. Strike that, reverse it. Either way, we only got one more week left of the regular season. It's rivalry week. We'll have plenty of action to get to there. As always, we want to hear from you in the chat. If you're at home right now around the holidays, you don't need to be hanging out with your family longer than usual. Come on over here. I'm sure you got the update from the BR app. Hang out for a little bit, ditch them. That way you don't have to talk politics with your uncle that's on Facebook too much. It's all great. So file instead your claims directly to the chat. Our producer Ryan will get some of those. I'll see them up on the screen in front of me. It's always more fun when we get to do this together. And that's the goal for today, because we have a ton of stuff to get to, a big weekend to react to that produced a lot of great rankings from our movement in the rankings that we saw last night. So before we get to any of our play breakdowns that we usually get to, overreaction or not, the trust tree, let's take a look at the rankings. We're not quite at the penultimate rankings yet, but we're close. We're getting very close. Let's see what changed. So on the left, you're going to see the bracket as it would be currently constructed right now. That's a reminder. It is the 4 top seeds that get the first round bye, that being Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and Georgia. And then the way you see the rest of this, because on the right, you've got the top 25, where you will see BYU and Miami at 11 and 12. You won't see them in the bracket necessarily in that order because of what else has to happen. Miami, sitting as the highest ranked team in the ACC, is their representative because we have the 5 highest ranked conference champions make the bracket. It's worth noting, right now, Miami does not control its own destiny to get to the ACC championship, so they would have to be an at-large bid. So this really would end up being Virginia more than likely at this point, considering Virginia and SMU control their own destiny to get to the ACC championship. And Tulane, the current highest-ranked Group of 5 team at number 19 in the polls, they would get the bump up all the way in here, so that would knock out BYU from the Big 12, trying to be that potential second team. So the big movement this week in terms of the CFP comes in a couple of places. One, Oregon, fresh off a marquee win for them against USC, who sits at number 17. USC came out to Autzen. Oregon managed to get it done. They move up a spot now over Ole Miss, who was idle last week. And it's a very important game coming up. We've talked on the stream a bunch about Lane Kiffin and the will he, won't he that's leading to the decision to be made after the Egg Bowl. So says their athletic director. So they get leapfrog a spot there. It's going to be fascinating. I believe Bomani Jones was the one I heard bring this up, but the idea for Ole Miss, who faces the very real possibility, tons of reports out there that Lane Kiffin and LSU seem like they're getting pretty close to something. We've seen the offers out there, the roster cash reports from Ross Dellinger over at Yahoo. I wouldn't put anything past Lane Kiffin at this point, but something Bomani brought up that was interesting was, much like we saw the College Football Playoff Committee look at Florida State a couple of years ago and say, hey, it's great that you still won the ACC, that you're undefeated, but you don't have Jordan Travis, the quarterback, to help make all this go, and so you're going to be knocked out of this in favor of a team who's better and healthier right now. What does the committee do if Ole Miss doesn't have Lane Kiffin? If they decide, hey, this is going to be too awkward for everybody, we don't want to give you the bit of free advertising going into or going into the college football playoff run where you get a ton of exposure, you get a ton of media coverage, would the committee ding them like you would a player injury by saying you're not the same team that we saw do all the things you did during the season? That would feel deeply unfair to me, the same way it felt with Florida State for what they've gone out and accomplished. And we know Ole Miss right now, not in line to be in the conference championship game. They're hitting that sweet spot that Lane talked about. So a lot to question there, but Oregon jumping them one spot. Both of them, for what it's worth, would still be in position to host the home games, as you see right there. Oregon hosting Miami, who would get in here, and Ole Miss hosting Alabama, which would be interesting for a ton of Lane Kiffin-related reasons. The other one to keep an eye on, Miami inching ever closer. Now, they're technically inside that top 12 field. Again, I feel compelled to make this case. Miami is in this bracket right now because they're the highest-ranked ACC team. they're, barring chaos, not going to have a chance to play for the ACC championship. So Miami fans, I wouldn't get excited seeing this bracket because the pathway for your team is still as an at-large, and that right now still seems like a long shot. Now, this weekend's the big one for Miami. Pitt, coming off a big win, upsetting Georgia Tech at home in Pittsburgh. Supposed to be a cold weather day, the kind of stuff that's the antithesis of Miami football. And this Pitt team, the common opponent, Notre Dame, who still 3 spots ahead of Miami at number 9. And it sounds like, according to the committee this week, considered more closely together. And still the committee dying on that hill that they believe since that game, Notre Dame has acquitted itself more like a team that they believe would be better at this point. And thus that head-to-head, which is a factor but not the lone deciding factor, puts that bit of distance between the two of them. So that's the justification that we saw again for two teams where Miami, all you can try and hope to do at this point is get it close. Now, if things really broke your way and there's a massive situation where you could wind up ending this year with 5 or 6 teams in the ACC tied at 6-2 in the conference in a way that would trigger some things that could potentially get Miami into the ACC championship, which has prompted a whole other discussion about, hey, does the ACC need to get divisions back because these conferences are too big and unwieldy to produce the right, because the schedules are so different in conference? Do you have a team who doesn't play a daunting schedule a la Virginia this year make their way in despite maybe not being, as in some people's minds, deserving of that opportunity as a team like Miami? We'll let everyone else fill in the blanks on that, but all that is to say, Miami is going to need those style points like we saw from Notre Dame this past weekend against Syracuse in the ACC, where everyone's going to be looking. Notre Dame played them a couple of weeks ago. It was a game that was never really close. Pat Narduzzi has to call a timeout with 5 seconds left, so going to be very interesting. K Barnyard, Indiana, so fraudulent. Mendoza going to show his true colors once they play in a real big game. Listen, man, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the Oregon game on the road was a big game. You know, Illinois gone sideways, going on the road to Iowa. We've seen them drag people down into the muck. The Penn State team still very talented. So it hasn't been the most daunting test for Indiana, I'll grant you. But compared to last year, that Oregon game matters. That's a big one to me in terms of how we judge them. And I also think, again, what we saw year over year, it'll be interesting against Ohio State, who, listen, for the Buckeyes, banged up right now, wide receiver going into the game. We'll see what that looks like for Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, who have both missed the last game against Rutgers. I think Carnell Tate's missed a little while longer, so that's difficulty. Ethan Saby, 99. Why is Miami in over BYU? Because as we explained before, if you weren't here, Miami currently the highest ranked ACC team, but we know the ACC champion gets an automatic bid into the tournament. BYU would be in there, but we've got the group of 5 highest ranked champion in Tulane outside of the top 12, and we've got the highest ranked ACC team, or the ACC champion, outside of there, which means 11 and 12 are getting bumped. So barring something unforeseen, 11 and 12 in the final rankings are going to be a trapdoor. Like, you're going to get bounced by the ACC champ and the group of 5 champ, and that's going to produce some confusion and frustration. So do with that what you will. BYU fans, I saw somebody in there who was upset. I understand it to an extent. Like, when you look at BYU's resume this year, we talked about this the other week. BYU compared to a team like Oregon, who before last week didn't have that same ranked win to point to that BYU currently does, with a Utah team that moved back a spot, I think understandably so. Like, flip-flopping Miami and Utah based on last week made sense. Utah the last 2 weeks, I don't know what's happened with that defense. 430 yards passing given up to Sawyer Robertson and Baylor 2 weeks ago, over 440 yards rushing given up to Kansas State's rushing attack. Like, I didn't recognize that group and what Kyle Whittingham has normally had production-wise from them. So that, to me, justified in moving Miami over that team. Vanderbilt, hey, I can understand some of the frustration there. Diego Pavia, listen, I'm a Heisman voter, so I can't really say. Beans80, what's up, man? Nice to see you, too. Love you. Mean it. Vanderbilt, I can understand the frustration. Diego Pavia, though, at the very least, I'm a Heisman voter. I can't divulge anything about what I'm voting for, but he seems like a guy who is playing his way into that conversation for the invite to New York. I don't know if they're going to win it based on the way the season's gone at this point, but man, as important to any team as anyone ever. This is all semantics because we know Georgia is winning it all, says ATL fan 88. They're one of the teams right now. Like, going back a couple of weeks, started to look the part a little more, the way they dismantled Texas in the final, let's call it quarter and a half of a game that had been played pretty closely. That looked like the group. Cutthroat 42, couldn't disagree more. I understand people might not like Diego Pavia and all the noise that he makes, his mom makes, Theo Vaughn being involved in it all. I promise you, that team would not be anywhere close to where it is now without him. He has been incredible. So believe me, I understand too. Defending Alabama, I'm still shocked that they're ranked below Notre Dame. But again, Notre Dame is a testament to this committee and what it seems to value, which is all of the eye tests, the stats that reflect that in terms of FPI, explosive play rate, all these different things that point back to Notre Dame right now handling its business like one of the best teams in the country. So do with that what you will. If you got more questions or reactions about the top 25, feed them into the chat. Our producer Ryan will go and mine those, but I want to get to some of what happened this past weekend in college football. And I want to start with the Oregon Ducks getting the win that so many people have been talking about, eluding them through this season. People pointing at Oregon's schedule, asking where the marquee win was supposed to be. And it came this weekend against a USC team that, got thumped in South Bend, has had some road struggles, but still gave them plenty to worry about here. You see us start things off. End around play to Jordan Davison, part of that running back room. Kenyon Sadiq, who's got NFL scouts salivating at tight end, built like an absolute Greek god and plays like it too. Special teams got into the mix too. Dan Lanning frothing at the mouth still from the pregame, talking about Matt Leinart not walking through that door. He never would have made that tackle anyway. The speed was on display for this team time and time again, as was the power. Noah Whittington's kind of been the engine for this team so far this year. And Dante Moore, I thought, had a much-needed return to form in this game. You saw some of the throws that have NFL people curious. I still think you probably come back for a year's success for one-and-done quarterbacks in terms of starters in the NFL. And I know he played some at UCLA, but you know what I mean, full-time starters not there. But this was an important statement for Oregon in this game and the way they went about handling their business. Todd Hildridge, not a huge ND fan, but I'd agree with Love. Baller. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. No thing there. Dan Lanning is a tool bag. So let's talk about that. Dan Lanning had a lot to say about this matchup, USC, everything going into this, and reference. I had never seen this, and if you haven't, go and look online. I think Jeff Schwartz, former Oregon offensive lineman, quote tweeted it. Before every college football game that comes out, especially for people that work in the media, the sports information departments put in game notes that tell the story of each team, give you relevant statistics, things that'll help the broadcasters and people kind of call the game. USC had the most combative notes I had ever seen, going bar for bar with the historical stats and data about Heisman Trophy wins, national championships, NFL pros, all these different things that certainly favored USC, who was one of the dominant programs of the early 2000s in my childhood and is one of the most historic blue bloods in college football. The most combative game notes I've ever seen. And Dan Lanning and company don't need too much help to go and get the motivation that we see them weaponize before all these games. So do so at your own risk. Do so at your own risk. And Dan Lanning, yes, also made the point about the SEC playing cupcake schedules. Hey, listen, I think at this point, everyone is kind of throwing stones from a glass house. You're always going to go from your perch. These coaches understand the opportunity they have to politic right now in front of the congregation. The bottom line is Oregon got one game left this weekend, I believe, against Washington. Sitting at 6 right now, I think they're going to be in. I think they're a pretty comfortable lock on the road. Washington, pretty good team, so going to be good. Smacked USC with our two best wide receivers hurt. Listen, USC, until further notice, win one of the big games on your schedule. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's an incredibly talented offense, tons of firepower. We know Lincoln can call plays, but right now, those marquee moments have eluded them so far this season. I want to go in this game and talk about one of the big plays that just happened and kind of show you what Will Stein and this Oregon offense have been working on here. We're going to look at the touchdown pass that Kenyon Sadiq had early in this game. So what I want you to notice about this play right off the jump, they got big. Tight end here, and then Kenyon Sadiq, who is a tight end, but can run like a wide receiver and is an adept pass catcher, so they put him in the slot. But 3 tight, what you're trying to do there is dictate who the defense is going to put on the field. This goes back to USC playing Notre Dame, who tried to bet against the quarterback and say, hey, we don't want CJ Carr to beat us over the top, so we're going to play 2 high safeties. You're going to try and take that away. Notre Dame was happy to hand the ball off and run. USC will put a little more down in the box this time around. So with this, though, they try and get guys on the field. So what you got here is 5 up on the line of scrimmage, 2 linebackers back, and 4 defensive backs, base personnel, which means you got a safety matched up with Kenyon Sadiq in the slot. So when you work off the run fake up front, it's going to buy everyone down into this lower part of the box, and it's going to open it up for that slant RPO on the backside of this play and create a really advantageous matchup. So you see everyone in the box sloughs down. Dante Moore does a good job evading pressure in the pocket and then is able to drop one off to Sadiq, who's got plenty of time and room in the back of the end zone. So one of the things that Oregon has certainly done well this year, use pieces like that to manipulate the defense and go out. Noah Whittington being the base and being the engine that makes the offense go, help set all that up by a credible threat of the run, building that play action pass that leads to a play like that. So pretty cool stuff there. Let's talk about the Big 12. And what we had go on this weekend. Big 12 coming off a wild one. I was sitting watching after the game I called Arizona and Baylor this last weekend at an airport bar watching back and forth as BYU and Utah were both in absolute barn burners. Let's start off with BYU, who is on the road playing at Nippert against the Cincinnati Bearcats, who have been a tough team to figure out this year. Super talented. Brendan Sorsby is a great quarterback. But at times just not inconsistent enough. No Silent Griffin. We're going to talk about the Big 12 on this here program. Bear Bachmeier getting involved in the action as he always does on the ground early when you wear 47. That's kind of your birthright. Sorsby, meanwhile, has done stuff like this all year long. Cyrus Allen in the back of the end zone for the tutty here. Unfortunately, he's also done stuff like this. A little bit of pressure flushed and the interception by the BYU defense that's been handling its business for most of the year. This team getting it done on the ground, big bodies, built the right way across the board. Sorsby trying to get him close. Jeff Caldwell, big, rangy wide receiver. But again, the run game up front for BYU, able to kind of start and finish the game. They put it on ice here. And so this is a team that I can understand the frustration of their fans, again, with the resume they've put on tape for a lot of this season. I've talked about Bear Bachmeier a ton on this. The numbers never going to be overly gaudy, but he's improved a lot as a thrower. Remember the circumstances that led to him here, what happened in the offseason with, the former BYU quarterback now at Tulane. Bear Bachmeier coming over from Stanford as a freshman and being able to go and lead this team to the record they have. It's a pretty incredible group. Utah, on the other hand, my oh my, we talked about the wild nature of the last couple of weeks for this team. These two kind of been mentioned hand in hand, right? BYU owns the head-to-head win. They've been ranked above Utah. And Joe Jackson, he is for real. 24 carries. That's not a typo. 293 yards on a day where Kansas State had over 400 overall. This Utah team has basically had to subsist on a heavy diet of quarterback run in the backfield, Avery Johnson fighting his tight end alone in the end zone. And this is just a full-blown shootout. Again, defense was optional on both sides, but credit to Utah. They made the plays down the stretch, including this one. 4th and 1, 2 minutes left on their own side of the field. And Jason Beck calls the number of his quarterback. Devin Dampier scoots to set this up down inside their own 5-yard line and then finishes the drill with under a minute left. So pretty incredible. But again, this team has, by my own standards, I came into this season with really high hopes for Utah, and it's been different than we expect. The loss against Texas Tech early in the season, we've been over this a bunch on this show. Closer than the final score indicates, but still lost. Play the game against BYU, still losing a rivalry game. So unfortunately losing those spots. And now, again, in an eye test heavy committee, the last 2 weeks, the defense, either against the pass or the run, has been non-existent. And so as a result of that, you had to play your way back in like this. Utah, Silent Griffin, if Utah wins out, I don't believe that they're going to make it in. Again, we look back at the rankings right now for where Utah sits. Utah moving down below Miami this week, and deservedly so, at number 13. They're on the road at Kansas to finish the season. And I think barring something unforeseen, their room for upward mobility is only going to be but so much. Even if BYU handles their business, the team that beat this Utah team makes it to the Big 12 championship. Texas Tech and BYU control their own destiny for that. If Utah loses in that game, we've talked about this all the time. The committee, it's not supposed to be a negative that you play in your conference championship game and have that 13th data point. And so I wouldn't expect BYU to drop down below Utah. So I think you've got to cap unless something real, like if BYU gets annihilated and Utah finishes the season on the best note ever, maybe. But I think at this point for both BYU and Utah, it's going to be really tough. And for BYU, your only hope in my mind is to win the Big 12 championship. I think if BYU wins the Big 12 championship, there's a chance to get two teams in because Texas Tech's sitting there at 5, and I don't think they drop fully out of this, even though they'd be in the mix with all the 2-loss teams then, and you've got the loss to Arizona State that might sting depending. We got a ranked territorial cup coming up as U of A creeps in at number 25, Arizona State sitting at number 20 right now. So depending on how that goes, that loss might look better or worse in the eyes of the committee. But I still think at this point, it looks like if I'm going to game it out based on who I think wins, Texas Tech is probably going to be the lone representative for the Big 12 in the college football playoff. But if BYU can go and right the wrong of that loss on the road during the season, then I think we're talking about two teams from the Big 12 that could potentially make it the kind of chaos you need to have that happen. Speaking of chaos, let's talk about the ACC. Pitt got us started this last weekend with a little bit of ACC coastal remnants in terms of the chaos that they can provide there. Pat Narduzzi, fresh off licking his wounds from the Notre Dame loss at home, came back out with restored glory in this game against a Georgia Tech team that had been leaking fuel on defense for a while. Haynes King's a bona fide Heisman candidate, but this defense had been one of the worst in college football and played like it here. Mason Heinschel goes and finds the wideout in the corner, play action pass here to the tight end up the seam. We'll break that one down a little bit and show you how it all came together. But they got out early to that 21-0 lead, were able to be so productive that it just never really gave Georgia Tech a chance to battle back. They're not the kind of team that's built to throw themselves back in from behind. That being said, Georgia Tech got it awfully close, and then this happened. Pick six that helps in part slam the door. I thought Pitt showed real maturity in their responses to some of the late-game Georgia Tech surges. So this is part of the difficulty here. Haynes King, once again, going to have monster counting stats, passing, running, doing everything he does for that team. I think he came into that game averaging somewhere just north of 340 yards of total offense a game. So he is an absolute mutant. With Georgia Tech's loss, is there a scenario where the ACC could miss out on all this entirely? I don't think so. So again, the way we look at this now, in the ACC, the highest ranked team we have left is Miami. Virginia is sitting at number 18, SMU sitting at number 21. And based on the current ACC standings, if those two teams win, they're in the ACC championship. None of the rest of the coastal chaos can happen unless those two teams lose. Virginia has a rivalry game against Virginia Tech, so obviously crazy things can happen there. And SMU's on the road against Cal, who at this point does not look like the Calgorithm is online as much as it was last year. So I think more than likely the ACC is going to get a team in, and it's going to be the team from the ACC championship. Unless Miami can go out here and absolutely tattoo Pitt in a way, like I'm talking like Notre Dame, Syracuse style, pluck the wings off them in a way that helps out, because Pitt back in the rankings this week at number 22 would be another ranked win, would be a common opponent against Notre Dame. And when they're sitting there at 10-2 at the end of the season, I think that's going to be difficult. Silent Griffin, who would have thought Virginia? I certainly not me, but again, when this team has had their quarterback healthy and what Chandler Morris has done for this group, remember, when you look at Virginia's schedule, that loss against Wake Forest came when Chandler Morris wasn't available health-wise to them. So something the committee could also factor in. But again, they're ranked 18th. So I think they're only going to be respected so much for a schedule that once Florida State went south, once Louisville went south, really lacked some of that same bite. You had the loss against NC State early in the season that, because of a schedule quirk, is technically an out-of-conference game, or else we'd be having a very different conversation about this whole scenario. While we're talking about Pitt, we did have a play we wanted to show you from that win for them. That's going to be interesting. Miami is going to be, again, right up there with Notre Dame as one of the best defenses that they've faced. The two best defenses, I think I can comfortably say, that Pitt will face all year. Miami plays a fast, insanely physical brand of football, and so they're going to need every trick in the book like this one. So we're going to watch this play what's going to happen is you're going to end up getting some space cleared out for the tight end down here in the seam. So you're in the red zone. They actually got backed up. So it's 1st and 15 here, which sometimes helps getting down into the red zone. We talk about for defenses, the windows get smaller. It's easier for defenders to break on footballs. And so you need more things to play with the way that they see the world. And so what you're going to get right here is little switch. So you're going to get this wide receiver going into out, this wide receiver going out to in. And what that's going to do is there's a safety back here that's going to get him involved in that conversation. It's going to keep this corner occupied out here, and it's going to open up space in the middle for the tight end that's going to kind of give a little shuffle motion here and then get tied up with this linebacker. That linebacker is supposed to carry him through until he gets to the next person. And you're going to get the hard sell from this tight end, a little like Y shake almost. And then he's going to pop here into the void left again. When you get these two guys crossing in, it just parts the seas in the back of the defense here and ends up creating a really nice score for Pitt in the passing game. This is the kind of stuff they've got the time to pull this off. Like, that's what this play needs, is the time for the quarterback to get this off. And that was something that Mason Heinschel didn't have against Notre Dame. And it's something he may struggle to have against Miami with the guys that they have, Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, on that defensive front. So that's my worry for this weekend for them. Weather's on their side. I played, again, Miami's incredibly motivated right now, but my own personal history, played against Miami in the Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas. It snowed that day, and I saw the Miami players in the tunnel with every bit of cold gear they could have possibly mustered, and they still look completely miserable. So this is what we always talk about with November and December football. What a great opportunity for Mario Cristobal, former offensive line coach, offensive lineman who prides himself on the kind of toughness that this defense especially should be able to show. We'll get to Carson Beck when we do our quarterback tiers later on in the show. Let's get to overreaction or not as we wait to see what's going to happen in a chaotic ACC this weekend. Overreaction or not, scheduling cupcake games at the end of the season is lame. I'll say not an overreaction. Now, everyone puts them at different times of the year. Call me old-fashioned. It's kind of nice to have them more in the beginning of the season. We know everyone's getting warmed up. At the end of the year, when you've got, like, the SEC, FCS invitational, I get bored. Like, there's no reason to watch those games. They're almost completely non-competitive. It's great stat padding for a lot of guys that are trying to show off their stuff, but it feels like a week off. It's kind of a built-in bye for a lot of these teams in some ways. You can get guys out of there early, not have them play into the fourth quarter. So it is, but I'm only going to be so mad. Again, you heard the comments from Dan Lanning on this front. I just think from an entertainment standpoint for us, it'd be nice to see them play real games. But if it's your team and you have a chance to get that kind of breathing room and late in the season, then you take it. And for what it's worth, I think we're going to see more of that. Talking about the Ohio State wide receivers, I'd be stunned if Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate aren't playing. I think Jeremiah Smith was on Caleb Downs' podcast with his brother and said he was trending that way. I do wonder if with the long season for teams that are primed to make a deep postseason run or have made deep postseason runs before, if there is going to be a little load management where there is. Tay Johnson, Notre Dame safety, Marcus Freeman said probably not going to play in their last game against Syracuse or Stanford, but should be ready to go for the playoffs. So how these teams that have been through this already factor that into the way they go about their team building. Going to be really fun to watch. Lane Kiffin is for sure going to Baton Rouge. Overreaction or not? I'm going to say overreaction. Predicting what Lane Kiffin's going to do seems really hard. I genuinely don't know. I was on with Dan Patrick this morning, and he brought up the point of, hey, Lane Kiffin, the ultimatum or whatever it is after the Egg Bowl, if he makes the decision to take that job, do you let him stay and coach or not? Do you leave that decision up to the players on that team? I think ultimately for me, it'd be nice to say, hey, if Lane is amenable to staying, you leave that up to the players. That's probably not realistic. I would love to think they have that kind of juice in this, but I would like to see that factored in because they're the ones that get left behind in most of this conversation now. Everyone's pointed out it's pseudo-professional sports at this point. Some of those same guys could and probably will follow Lane to wherever job he goes to next. But, like, man, you pour a lot into these seasons, and to all of a sudden walk in potentially to the postseason, either with that hanging over your head, if the team doesn't want to handle it that way and they feel scorned and they would rather not do that, then more power to them. But if everyone could put that aside, and lots of coaches have coached through the end of the season, but we know the pressure's on them to get started with the class in the next school now that usually lead to the divorce in these situations. But it just feels like such a disservice to the opportunity that Ole Miss has in front of them right now with this year's team, and that includes Lane Kiffin. Saturday should be the biggest game of Ryan Day's coaching career. I'll say overreaction on this. Ryan Day won a national championship last year. Like, that was the biggest day of his coaching career, and he passed. I understand the game means a lot to people around those parts, but I still, I don't know, man. I just have a really hard time putting that kind of pressure on this. They're not going to fire Ryan Day if he loses to this year's Michigan team again. Now, it would complicate some things, certainly. And oh, by the way, like, this Michigan team sitting there, ranked, well-respected, much better than the team Ohio State lost to last year, even if this is still a game that they're expected to win. But right now, Michigan's sitting there at 9-2 with their only losses on the road at USC, who's ranked, and on the road against Oklahoma in the top 10. Like, it's a pretty, interesting resume. Now, the marquee wins are hard to come by. You've got the win against Nebraska on the road, wins against a good Washington team, Northwestern, Maryland this past week. But, like, this would be the one. So Ryan Day, his standing there wouldn't be affected in any way, but it would make the conversation around the Thanksgiving dinner table next year pretty uncomfortable. So I think they should take care of business. Bryce Underwood has struggled on the road against quality opponents. This will be, no shade to Oklahoma, this will be the best defense they face all year. And what Matt Patricia and this group can do with Arvell Reese, with Caleb Downs, the caliber of athletes they have, they can present a lot of different looks for the young quarterback, and that's kind of where he's struggled so far. He's all fastball right now. He's so talented. I'm sure will grow into a great player. No Justice Haynes in this game. Backfield's banged up, and that's kind of been the way they've won games, so I have my concerns. No team should get a double bye, overreaction or not. I'll say overreaction. Part of this is self-serving, but what we mean by the double bye is a team shouldn't miss the conference championship and then get a bye. As we're situated right now in the college football playoff, again, the four highest ranked conference champion, or the four highest ranked teams make it regardless of that. So at this point, we're gearing up for 1 and 2 to play each other in the Big Ten championship, and then 3 and 4 to play each other in the SEC championship in Texas A&M and Georgia. So I don't know what's going to happen if those games are close, if those games aren't, how that would affect the seeding, and would it allow a team that was not playing in their conference championship? So you'd have to go down to a team like Oregon, who would probably need like Texas Tech to lose in the Big 12 championship in order to not be a team playing on conference championship day. This really seems like an Oregon question, but no, I don't think so. And this does, by the way, part of the committee's change to do this and normalize the seeding, naturalize the ceiling, does open it up for an undefeated Notre Dame team to not play in a conference championship and eventually get this, which I know based on the reactions to Notre Dame's presence in the college football playoff rankings this year would probably cause them to burn the whole system down. Last but not least, the Heisman will come down to Indiana versus Ohio State. I'll say overreaction because I want to believe, hey, in a year where you've got an incredibly compelling running back in Jeremiah Love, Jacob Rodriguez at the helm of an awesome defense, plenty of really good quarterbacks. We talked about Pavia, Haynes King. It's supposed to be a body of work award, even though we know right now Fernando Mendoza's played great football, and if he has a banner day in these big games at the end of the season, would that be enough to take him over the line with this? Probably, because this tends to be an award that skews towards the quarterback, but I would like to believe that this is an overreaction and that that's not the case. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's talk about trust. It's the quarterback trust tree. We do it every week here, highlighting and celebrating some of the great quarterback play around the country, and also giving a nod to some guys that, this is supposed to be the trust tree, the quarterbacks that we believe could help lead their team to a national championship. And sometimes it veers into, hey, some guys had some pretty cool performances, and we want to get to celebrate it. So, that being said, Fernando Mendoza still sits on the mountaintop right now. He's been sensational. They've been the number 2 team in the country for a while at this point. We've talked about the nature of that offense being such a heavy RPO-based offense, puts a lot on the quarterback to make great decisions, and he has so far this season. Julian Sand going out this last weekend and doing it without his 2 top wide receivers, building the whole thing out of running back and tight end touches and still making it work. He's bought time well. He's an incredible prospect for the next level too. But I do want to highlight Diego Pavia, who against a Kentucky team that's dragged a lot of people down into the mud, 33 of 39, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, rushing the football, led the team, 15 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown there. So 6 total touchdowns, over 500 yards of total offense. This is what he means to this team. Like, it hasn't always been those gaudy numbers, but I promise you, the way he impacts their offense, opposing defenses, like, it's been amazing. So watching Diego Pavia has been awesome. We're probably going to get to watch him till he's like 30 if they continue to soon win in the courts. So get used to that. And the bottom tier, Dante Moore, we talked about the game he had earlier. Awesome rebound for him in Oregon after a couple of games that were a little bit uglier. Carson Beck against Virginia Tech. I know that game they scored late to make it a 17-point win, and it was a little bit closer than that, at least score-wise, but Carson Beck stayed 27-32, 320, and 4 touchdowns. That looks more like what people expected after the turnover-riddled stretch where they lost those 2 games against Louisville and SMU. So awesome to see him back out there cutting it loose at a high level. CJ Carr and Marcel Reed, both kind of the honorable mention ones in there for guys on teams right now in the field who are expected to go far and who continue to play excellent football, even though CJ Carr, I think, had like 50 yards passing this weekend because the defense and special teams had put up 21 points before the offense even took the field. It was one of the most insane. Go check the Notre Dame-Syracuse box score if you want to have a laugh. Syracuse, time of possession was almost 3-1 Notre Dame. Hey, they had more first downs than Notre Dame did in that game, and Notre Dame beat them 70-7, and that final touchdown for the only touchdown for Syracuse was scored in the waning seconds of that game against the 2s and 3s. It was just bonkers. And last but not least, let's give it up for the UConn Huskies. So this is a cool story. We talked about this a little last week. Pull it up right here in the standings. So UConn, who, by the way, Jim Mora Jr., it was reported, is getting set to take the job at Colorado State at the end of the season. Colorado State, that's going to be part of the new Pac-10, Pac-12 that's reforming with a lot of the Mountain West teams jumping conferences to join up with Oregon State and Washington State. Colorado State, tons of money in that program. They fired Jay Norvell in the middle of this season. In terms of the investment, they seem like one of those programs, the stadium, the surrounding infrastructure, the area that's primed to make a jump. So I can't totally say, like, I know a lot of UConn people were a bit put off by this, but UConn being an independent is a lot different than Notre Dame being an independent in terms of what it means for what's available to you. But man, back-to-back 9-win seasons for the first time in school history is pretty remarkable. And Joe Fagnano, their quarterback, had a monster final game. They played Florida Atlantic in the last game of the season. And Joe Fagnano finished off this year 33 of 46, 466 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Their wide receiver, Skylar Bell, 8 catches for 125 yards, is a Biletnikoff Award finalist. Like, it is amazing. Rose blooming through concrete kind of stuff going on in stores. So I know it's about to get upended if Jim Mora Jr. Truly leaves. I don't know who they hire next, and if they can replicate this sort of 4-year rebuild that not a lot of us saw with the potential to have success. I grew up in Central Connecticut. I saw the Randy Edsall years when UConn looked like it was doing good. This has been a fun revival, so just wanted to shout out Fagnano, Skylar Bell, the rest of that group that's played phenomenal football for a lot of this season. So that is our quarterback trust tree. This has been our show. As always, we appreciate everybody who jumps into the comments, reacting with us to everything that's gone on in college football. We're going to keep it rolling. Thank you to our producer, Ryan, as always, for the help and care he and everyone at Bleacher put into this show. You can always check this out on the BR app, the Bleacher Report YouTube channel. We'll be here every Wednesday breaking down what we got happening. Enjoy this one. Thanksgiving coming up. Hope everyone has a happy and safe Thanksgiving. For the people that are going to go out and burn it down on Wednesday night, God bless you. I have aged out of that a long time ago, and I am no desire to go back. Enjoy the holiday itself. Enjoy a great weekend. Football, wall-to-wall over the weekend, college and NFL. We'll be back here to sort through the wreckage next week right here on Bleacher Report. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you then.